because this is true crime and the sensitive nature of it. Please, nobody under the age of 14 should be watching these videos, and even then, viewer discretion is advised. So, Kayla Berg. She is a missing person. Missing 8/11/2009. This young lady was born 8/29/1993. Today she would be 28 years old. At the time of her disappearance, she was 15. She has brown eyes, brown hair, and a scar on her right shin, pierced ears and pierced navel, and goes by the nickname KK. On August 11, 2009, she left her home with a family friend at 8:45 p.m. She was living with her father at the time, who was had cancer, very sick with cancer, and told her father that she was just going out for the evening with Kevin, and she would be right back. And that was at 8:45 p.m. Kevin Kielcheski, a 24-year-old family friend who had actually lived with them for a little while, was a good friend of her brother Jimmy's, and nobody had any concern if she had left with him for any reason. He picked her up, they drove around, I guess they smoked some marijuana, and that's the last anybody ever heard from him. Well, they say they were driving around their hometown of Antigo, Wisconsin, which is a very sleepy town in Wisconsin, population about 8,000. However, I looked up the reports, and in 2019 the population was 7,800, and it is known for its farming and lumber mills, manufacturing of furniture, chairs, doors, blinds, hubs, spokes, and other wood products. However, this city, though small, has a very high crime rate for its size. So I found that to be a very interesting fact. But, see, the thing is that Kayla wasn't just in her hometown. Kevin had taken her about 30 to 40 miles away in a different, larger city. So she should have been running around Antigo, but she wasn't just there. She actually wanted Kevin to take her to a city that the girls had been going to quite often without their parents' knowledge or permission, to party with older kids and even some college kids. That this had been happening quite a bit at the end of her sophomore year. And however, she was only 15 years old, did not have a cell phone, and felt probably that she was pretty safe because she was with people that she knew from her hometown. And Kevin, as he picked her up, so let's go back a little bit. Kevin picked her up, and at 9:30 she goes to the McDonald's where her friend works, and her friend sees her. Kayla's her normal bubbly self. She says, "See you later. I'll call you when I get done." Because see, they were all hanging out at her brother Jimmy's house earlier that day, and her brother Jimmy, this guy Kevin, who was 24, and a couple other people, and Tasha had to go to work, so she left. And this is why Kayla stops at the McDonald's. She wants to say hello to her friend. She started a new job, but her friend seemed like everything was fine. Kevin had dropped her, off, was waiting in the car, which was a common thing. I mean, she even said when I was watching the documentary, this gal said that, he always drove us around. It was no big deal. There was nothing about him that ever concerned us at all. Now, this was in August, so it was pretty warm, and it probably did not get dark till probably, since it's really north, it's one of the most northern towns in Wisconsin. It probably wouldn't have gotten dark until 10 o'clock at night. So in this tiny town, how could this girl, or even in surrounding towns that were slightly bigger, how could this young girl who knew the man that was driving her disappear? Well, apparently Kevin said that he dropped her off at her boyfriend Miguel's house. However, the house that he eventually gave the police the address of had been condemned, and Miguel had not lived there for at least a month, and everybody knew that. This is a group of friends that all knew each other. The families knew each other. The friends knew each other. So there was no reason for Kevin to drop her off there. But then listen to this. So he says he drops her off after kind of a week or two of trying to get the address out of Kevin. At first he says, I don't really remember. Then he says, well, I think it was this button. Well, maybe it was somewhere else. And finally he gives him the address of Miguel's old address, knowing darn well that she wasn't there. But not only did he drop her off there, but he said she just got out of the truck and started walking to this abandoned house. He said there were no lights, and at that time it was about 11 o'clock at night, 10:30, 11 o'clock. It was dark. He said there was no lights on either side. Now, Kayla's parents, they knew for a fact there's no way she would have gotten out of that car willingly, because she was terrified. I mean, terrified of the dark. So she would not ever have gotten out of that, especially a condemned house. The stranger thing is, the Friday before, she'd gone out with Miguel and saw his new house, so she would not have had Kevin drop her off there anyway, because that was his old condemned house. It was, the state came in and said, this isn't even fit to live in, you've got to rent somewhere else. So these facts are not adding up for Kevin. So let's go back kind of to the beginning. What was Kayla like? Well, Kayla was a promising gymnast. Got decent grades, actually very good grades, up until about her sophomore year, or end of her sophomore year. Her mom knew something was going on, but teenagers, that's what happens. But, sophomore, junior year, they start to rebel, or, they start to try, drinking or going out. They're trying to gain their independence. And what happens is that Kayla had started going to this town about 30 miles away, and there were others, older people there, even college kids. She started hanging out with this guy Miguel, dating him, and unbeknownst to her mother or any of her friends' parents, nobody knew that the girls were going there. They all kind of had this little, game of, well, I'm staying at her house, yeah, she's staying at my house, and how that goes. Well, the girls did not have cell phones. There was only one Well, here, as she's filling out this report, they get a call from the gal who does have a cell phone. It says they're on their way home. And that's when this all comes out, that they've been going to this other town, this bigger town about 30 miles away, and had been partying there and hanging out with older people. And Kayla's mom sits her down and says, look, I understand, you want your freedom, you're trying to kind of sow your oats, so to speak. And Kayla says, okay, I promise I won't do it again. I'll let you know where I'm at. And that's what Kayla's mom said. She says, it's not necessarily that she goes, I don't really want you going so far, but it's more that I don't know where you are. So if something did happen, how would I know where to find you? I wouldn't even know where to start. You don't have a cell phone. So I think that was more of her mother's concern than anything else. And she found out her daughter was, smoking pot and drinking and maybe, doing some other drugs. So, she sat her down and just kind of had to talk with her about, what this can do to her life. And she's got this promising career as a gymnast. And matter of fact, all her friends say, you should really, really pursue this because you're Olympic quality. You definitely have the talent. I mean, by the time everybody else was learning how to basically do a cartwheel, she was already contorting her body into crazy, flips and twists and configurations. I mean, she was a fantastic gymnast. Well, so after kind of all this happened, her mom is like, okay, so you're just gonna tell me where you're going. And then things just were not going so well in that little tiny town in Wisconsin. Now, Hope, which is Kayla's mom, gets an offer from her family in Texas, and they said, come on down here, there's plenty of jobs, there's work, you're gonna have a better life, you can get Kayla away from that. And at the time it seemed like a great idea, so they pack up all their belongings, says goodbye to all her friends. And Kayla's sad at this point, but they're both kind of excited for the new beginning, more money, a more prosperous life. Well, they get down there, and even though Hope's family is very welcoming and loving, it just isn't what they thought it was going to be. And after being there for a few months, Hope and Kayla sat down and said, we need to go home. And they both were really excited, actually, to get back to their, where they had come from. I mean, it just wasn't anything what they thought it was going to be like. It was so different than what they were used to. Not only the weather, but the people. There weren't any jobs, and it just, it didn't work out. So they get in a car, they tell everybody they're coming back, and not only had this not worked out, but Kayla's dad, who had cancer at the time, had taken a turn for the worst. So it was really a good thing that they were all on their way back up to Wisconsin to really be with the family. Now, because this wasn't a very organized move, it was just kind of like, oh my god, we gotta get out of here, let's go home. And even though they were both super excited, Kayla called all her friends, said, we're gonna go out, we're gonna have a great time just before our junior year, and so they drove 22 hours straight to get there. And when they got there, because it wasn't very organized, they didn't have a place to stay, they didn't have an apartment. Hope, Kayla's mom, actually had to stay with some friends, and Kayla ended up staying with her father. Now, her father, having cancer and needing really round-the-clock care, was living with his mom and dad. was fine. I mean, everything went fine when they first got back. It was that next weekend that they were all hanging out at her brother Jimmy's house. Her friend went to work, and she stayed behind to talk to Kevin. And he said, "Hey, I got a surprise for you, or a coming home gift, a bunch of weed." So this is kind of what sticks to my ribs when he says, "Oh, I've got a coming home gift, a big bag of marijuana." I'm thinking, well, that's interesting, luring her out, just him and her, to go smoke pot around town. I haven't read anywhere where like that was something normal that just he and one other girl did. He would take the girls together around town, but I didn't really read any accounts of him just hanging out one-on-one doing drugs with the girls or drinking. He would take them to the parties, but it was kind of more of a group thing. So she runs into her house where she's staying with her dad and says, "Hey, I'm going out with Kevin. I'll be back probably in a couple hours by 11 or 12. And he said, "Okay, honey, that's fine." And he said, "If anything changes, just, can you call me from wherever your friend house? If you want to stay over somebody's house, just call me." And she said, "No problem," waved goodbye. And unfortunately, that would be the last time that he would see her. But he wasn't really that concerned, because Kayla had been known to stay at friends' house, and it was kind of such a small community that they all kind of hung out together, and they trusted Kevin. I mean, there was no reason not to. He had known him all her life. And now I don't think he knew about Miguel at the time, but I think her mother did. The weird thing is that when her mom realized that she did not come home, she would say to one friend, "Hey, did you see Kayla?" "Oh yeah, she's staying with so-and-so." And then another night would pass, and she would say to another friend, "Hey, did you see Kayla?" "Oh no, she went then to somebody else." It was almost as if they were hiding her location for some reason. That's kind of what the police felt. They just felt that why would all these kids kind of pass the buck, so to speak? And they just couldn't figure that one out. Now, so what? Of course, they end up finding out 6 days later. 6 days later, they find out that Kevin had dropped her off at this abandoned, condemned, dark house by herself late at night and just took off. Didn't make sure she got in. Didn't make sure she was safe. And her mom said, "Oh, no. Nope. My daughter is terrified of the dark." I mean, terrified. She would never even have gotten out of the car. There's no way. And she knew where Miguel lived. So there was no reason for her to go to the old condemned house. Now, the police had actually questioned Kevin, and because he was driving a 15-year-old girl around smoking marijuana, he was arrested for, endangerment, child endangerment, and the prosecution couldn't really hold him due to lack of, reasonable cause and evidence. I mean, it was just mostly hearsay, and there really wasn't anything suspicious yet. So the police had gotten these tips, and they don't actually expose everything about the case. was in the company of friends, and they were withholding her whereabouts for some odd reason, and this is why it took them 6 days. Well, her mom finally did file a police report, and that's when all of this, they got an arrest warrant for Kevin, but it was dismissed 2 years later, citing lack of probable cause, even though things of interest were found. But this is what I'm talking about. Things of interest were found, and they did release a couple things. There was blood on both Miguel and Kevin's cars. But it was, I guess, cleaned so much, or when luminol was sprayed, it did show up as blood. However, when they took samples, it came back inconclusive, so that was upsetting. Then they did a lineup of Kevin, Miguel, and 10 other cars, and they had cadaver dogs smell these cars, and the cadaver dogs only hit on Kevin's car. Out of all the cars that were there, this was a blind test, so a blind lineup, so the handlers didn't know, the dogs didn't know, but each of the dogs hit on Kevin's car. Then I guess they took the dogs to a place that they had been tipped off where she might be, and Kevin's things were there. Maybe it was his residence. They're very, very vague on this of exactly what it was, but again, the cadaver dogs hit on her and Kevin's belongings every time, and they had done this with 3 different blind tests in different places, like his house, his car, and then some other, like his clothing, I think. So that was very, very strange. But there's no evidence. Literally, the luminol that was sprayed did show up that there was blood, but it was tested and it was nothing. But the cadaver dogs, that was really, really strange. But they could not get anybody to talk. They couldn't get anybody that knew anything, and he kept to his story. Miguel said, "She never showed up here. I have no idea why she would go to that house. She knew where I lived. Everybody knew where he lived, that he had moved." So that was disconcerting to Miguel as well. But her mother thinks that, and the police really do suspect that Kevin and Miguel kind of working together on this. I don't know if I have an opinion about that, because usually when there's more than one person, one will rat on the other. Very rarely will you find somebody who's, more than one people that are involved in a crime and nobody says anything to anybody. So as I'm, putting this video out there, if you know anything, this is the kind of stuff, even if it's the smallest piece of evidence that you think is so insignificant, could be a huge piece of evidence that you just don't know you're even holding on to. Weeks go by, they drain this nearby lake. They search for her there. They search and search, and they did not find anything of her. Even though, Miguel was her boyfriend, and he said that she did not contact him that night, and could not figure out why she would go to the condemned house and not his new house. And of course, there was no proof that he had any connection to Kayla after her disappearance, even though the police feel as though he might know something. 2011. Okay, in 2011, a search in Nicollet National Forest, for some reason, was brought up that they needed to search there. They had this big tip. So with 7 canine teams, the Antigo Police on October 20th go and conduct this really thorough search of this Nicollet National Forest, and nothing showed up. So this tip was obviously something that was very, very credible, or else these police would have not spent the money and time just to go there and for fun, for S&Gs, as I say. And then in 2011, there was a property search that Channel 7 had been there for, and another one in 2016 in February. They tried to open the search records, but the request was denied, and that was confusing because why wouldn't those findings of that search be available? What did they find in that search that gave them any clues? Are they holding back, evidence so that they are building a case? That could be very, very possible. A lot of, police departments will do that. And that way, if the killer comes forward or says something to somebody and you call in a tip, it would be only something that the killer would know. So think in your brain, if you had any connection to any of those people, anything anybody said, strange, regular, whatever, not even strange, just kind of think back to then and see, and anything you can come up with, you've got to call the police department, their Antigo Police Department, or Crime Stoppers, which is an anonymous hotline you can call. So you do not even have to give them your name, just what you know. And I will leave all those links in the description. So the saddest thing is that her dad, his last wish was to find his daughter before he died. And unfortunately, he did eventually pass away without ever knowing what happened to his daughter, which I find to be terribly heartbreaking. Her mother is still out there, still looking for her, still has hope. She's true to her name. She feels that somebody knows something, and for some reason isn't coming forward. Even Kayla's best friends, a couple of them were on the ID, and the ID Discovery, documentary, and they were saying, just they cannot put it together in their minds that Kevin just never did anything to them. He never did anything wrong. So it was so confusing as to what happened to her. And the police, everybody asked, well, why did you wait 6 days to report her missing? And like the mom said and the dad said, well, it got so convoluted because she would stay here, she'd stay there, she'd go to this town about 30 miles away, and they had jumped the gun the first time, so they wanted to make sure that she wasn't gonna just call. Her mom said that she just knew in her heart that she would just be calling any second, and really after she found out that Kevin had her last, and that he dropped her off at a condemned house that was pitch black, she said, nope, my daughter, there's something not right, and that really forced her into maybe if she's meeting him there, maybe they're gonna go for a walk. Who knows? But there's got to be something in your mind that says something isn't right here. This is way out in left field. I mean, he had known her all her life. He had lived with them for a while. He was his brother's best friend. This was not somebody who was a stranger at all. But there had to be some kind of motive or reason that he would want to take her out to the woods, smoke pot with her, and then just drop her off. I mean, something does not feel right. There is something there. And the cadaver dogs 3 times hitting on his belongings, his car, and his house. No. I'm sorry. There's something that is not there that he's not telling anybody. Now, her friends do think that there could have been a fight or an argument. Maybe she got too high. Maybe she got sick. Maybe there was something in the marijuana, like fentanyl, and she died and he had to bury her body. I don't know. But somebody in that group has to know something. I mean, there could have been anything. It could have been accidental. It didn't it doesn't always have to be that he meant to kill her. She could have been smoking the pot and had a bad reaction to something that the pot was laced with. So I don't know. I'm just throwing out things out, kind of that I've been thinking about to see if it clicks in anybody's mind out there. And if you know anything about Kayla's disappearance, or Kevin, or you will not get in trouble, you can call Crime Stoppers anonymously. You do not have to give your name. You can give them details that you think are important or not. They will kind of decide if they're important. So don't hesitate. If you know anything, any piece of evidence is still good, or any strange conversation that you've had even between now and then, with anybody that knows anybody in that group, or even if it's hearsay, bring it up to the police, because they are keeping some facts back, because they did find something on that second search. That's why they're not releasing that information to the public. So please don't be afraid to speak out. Think hard in your head. Think of different conversations you've had with people over the years. And if you feel that anything comes up in your head, it doesn't matter what it is or how silly you may think it is, it may be the way to find Kayla. So have a great evening. I really enjoyed doing this case, because I think, at first I was a little reluctant to do missing kids. That'd be some hair from my mic. I was really reluctant to do missing children. However, I see the benefit